Trapped Chinese miners' note sparks hopes for rescue. 12 miners trapped underground after an explosion in a Chinese gold mine a week ago are still alive. They sent back a note saying, "Don't stop trying to reach us," when rescuers seeking signs of life lowered down food rations taped to wire cable. A telephone connection has now been set up. The fate of another 10 men missing after the blast remains unclear. Mining accidents in China are not uncommon and are often due to poorly enforced safety regulations. The 22 were trapped at the Hushan mine near Yantai in eastern Shandong province on the 10th of January after an explosion damaged the exit and the communications system of the mine, which was still under construction. Rescuers have spent days tapping and waiting for signs of survivors until finally they felt pulling on ropes they had lowered into the mine. According to state media, rescuers managed to make contact with some of the miners through a long, thin communication shaft they had drilled from the surface. They later sent food, medicine, paper and pencils into the hole. According to the handwritten note they retrieved back from the shaft, 12 people are alive in the middle section of the mine. There are 11 others, one is injured, and the status of the remaining 10 is unclear, said the note writer. In it he asks for painkillers and says they hope for a rescue, before ending with thanks to the rescue team. Later on Monday, Chen Fei, the deputy secretary of Shandong's Yantai City, said phone contact had also now been made with the trapped miners, who he said are currently very weak. After we opened up the third shaft, it had a really excitable effect on the people connected. They were very confident and very hopeful that they would soon be able to get out of the mine, he told a news conference. We established they needed emergency medicines and equipment. 2 batches of provisions and one of medicine had been sent down the mine, which Mr. Chen said were enough to last those trapped 2 days. As well as painkillers, the 12 miners had reportedly asked for anti-inflammatory drugs and medical tape for the injured. They also said there were high levels of underground water. One of the rescue workers said they were now racing to get the miners out. Next step, we'll continue to use life detectors and other equipment to contact those trapped underground. At the same time, we're speeding the clearing of the main shaft and drilling additional rescue holes. Chinese media report there are also several other rescue shafts being drilled in the hope the workers thought to be about 600 meters 2,000 feet from the entrance can be evacuated. Virgin Orbit launches rocket off a 747 aircraft, puts 9 satellites in space. A 70-foot rocket, riding beneath the wing of a retrofitted Boeing 747 aircraft, detached from the plane and fired itself into Earth's orbit on Sunday, marking the first successful launch for the California-based rocket startup Virgin Orbit. Virgin Orbit's 747, nicknamed Cosmic Girl, took off from California around 10:30 a.m. Pacific Time with the rocket called Launcher 1 nestled beneath the plane's left wing. The aircraft flew out over the Pacific Ocean before the rocket was released, freeing Launcher 1 and allowing it to power up its rocket motor and propel itself to more than 17,000 miles per hour, fast enough to begin orbiting the Earth, in both a literal and figurative sense. This is miles beyond how far we reached in our first launch demo, the company posted on its Twitter account. The rocket flew a group of tiny satellites on behalf of NASA's educational launch of nanosatellites, or ALANA program, which allows high school and college students to design and assemble small satellites that NASA then pays to launch into space. The 9 small satellites that Virgin Orbit flew on Sunday included temperature monitoring satellite from the University of Colorado at Boulder, a satellite that will study how tiny particles collide in space from the University of Central Florida, and an experimental radiation detection satellite from the University of Louisiana at Lafayette. About 4 hours after takeoff on Saturday, Virgin Orbit confirmed in a tweet that all the satellites were successfully deployed into our target orbit. The successful mission makes Virgin Orbit only the 3rd so-called new space company startups hoping to overhaul the traditional industry with innovative technologies to reach orbit. after SpaceX and Rocket Lab. The success also paves the way for Virgin Orbit to begin launching satellites for a host of customers that it already has lined up, including NASA. The military and private sector companies that use satellites for commercial purposes. Virgin Orbit spun off from Virgin Galactic, a company focused on suborbital human spaceflight, in 2017. Virgin Orbit conducted several drop tests of its Launcher 1 rocket, which involved flying the vehicle out over the Pacific and letting it plunge into the ocean to vet the 747's release mechanism. Virgin Orbit's first attempt to put a rocket in orbit came last May, when Launcher 1 malfunctioned shortly after release and the flight was aborted. That failure wasn't unexpected. Launching from the Earth to space is mind-bogglingly difficult, the company said after the 2020 launch attempt. Virgin Orbit had expected to try a second orbital launch attempt in late 2020. But the company was forced to postpone after a few of its employees tested positive for COVID-19, according to an email from the company. That left many employees potentially exposed to the virus and under preventative quarantine. The company said, "We're grateful and fortunate that most of our teammates have since cleared their preventative quarantines, allowing us to proceed with pre-launch operations," the company said on December 31, albeit with even more extreme measures in place to protect the health and safety of our team. Virgin Orbit, like other space technology companies in the United States, is permitted to continue operations throughout the pandemic because the government deemed the space sector part of the country's critical infrastructure in March. As one industry group argued, the sector's commercial activity is also intertwined with crucial U.S. national security projects and NASA programs. The Trump baby blimp that dogged the president for years will live on in a museum. Giant blimp depicting Donald Trump as a diaper-clad baby, which followed the outgoing U.S. president on his visits to London and symbolized international opposition to his administration, has secured its place in history after being acquired by a British museum. The 20-foot-tall Trump baby blimp was created ahead of the president's first visit to the UK. When hundreds of thousands of Britons poured onto the country's streets to protest his presence in the country, it will now be displayed in the Museum of London alongside other remnants of public protests in the British capital. The institution announced on the eve of Trump's departure from the Oval Office, "We hope the baby's place in the museum will stand as a reminder of when London stood against Trump, but will prompt those who see it to examine how they can continue the fight against the politics of hate," the team behind the blimp said. The balloon became famous around the world when London's Mayor, Sadiq Khan, whom Trump has frequently denigrated, gave permission for it to fly above the city during his initial visit. Since then, it has followed the president on his trips around the world, appearing in Washington, D.C. and at several of Trump's rallies and international tours. This large inflatable was just a tiny part of a global movement, a movement that was led by the marginalized people whose Trump's politics most endangered, the blimp's creators added in a statement. London has always been an open, ever-evolving polyglot city, a haven for knowledge, tradition and controversy, and over thousands of years we have played host to many a historic protest, said Museum of London director Sharon Ament. Baby Trump balloon gets permit to be present for July 4 in D.C. By collecting the baby blimp, we can mark the wave of feeling that washed over the city that day and capture a particular moment of resistance, a feeling still relevant today as we live through these exceptionally challenging times, that ultimately shows Londoners banding together in the face of extreme adversity, she added. Trump is overwhelmingly unpopular in the UK and in several other major countries, and studies have shown that the global image of the US has tumbled under his leadership. Fewer than 1 in 5 people in Canada and Western Europe trusted Trump to do the right thing in international affairs, a Pew study found in September. A car thief threatened to call the police on a mom who left her child in the back seat of the car he stole. Oregon police are searching for a man who stole a car Saturday morning without knowing a Child was in the backseat and came back to lecture the victim of the car theft for leaving her child unattended. When the suspect saw the child, he returned to the mother and reprimanded her, threatened to call the police on her, and then drove away in her car. Beaverton Police spokesman Officer Matt Henderson told CNN. He hopped in the car, drove it, realized there was a 4-year-old inside, and drove back and ordered her to take the child out of the car and then drove away again, Henderson said. We're thankful he had the decency to bring the little one back. The little boy was unharmed, police said. The crime took place at a meat market in Beaverton, where Crystal Leary left the engine of her car running and doors unlocked before going inside for a few minutes to purchase meat and a gallon of milk. She was just 15 feet away from the car on the other side of the glass, Henderson said, but turned around at the wrong moment. As moms, we get really busy and we think we're just running in for a second, and this is just a perfect example of just letting our guards down and how terrible it could have ended, Crystal Leary, the mother, told CNN affiliate KPTV. I am thankful that he is okay. It was so stupid and I'll never do that again, but it's that split-second decision that can just change everything. The car, a 2013 silver Honda Pilot, who was recovered a few hours later in Portland, just 8 miles away from Beaverton. Police are still searching for the thief, according to Henderson. The suspect is described as a white male with long, dark brown braided hair. He wore a multicolored face mask. Anyone with information on the car theft can contact Beaverton Police at 503-629-0111. This is a good learning lesson for all of us who have children, Henderson said. Be extra careful with your kids, take the extra step to make sure they're safe.